countdown. The number of coronavirus cases is on the rise again in the U.S. as millions of Americans travel and gather for the Thanksgiving holiday. At the same time, federal health officials say more people are getting COVID-19 booster shots. More than 37 million eligible Americans have opted to get the additional dose, as NPR's Tovia Smith reports.
Right up there with turkeys and Christmas gifts, many holiday lists this year include an extra jab.
Do you want your right or your left? Left. Okay, perfect. Ready? Yeah. You're all set. You're good to go. Thank you, too.
At the Union Pharmacy outside Boston, hundreds came for a last-minute booster. While experts say the full effect takes 2 weeks, 40-year-old Sarah Lawrence is hoping for at least a little more immunity before she gets on a plane.
It will make me feel much more protected. I just think it's the right thing to do for myself and everyone else.
The CDC is still only encouraging boosters, but in a growing number of cases, they're required to be considered fully vaccinated. As one man getting his this week put it, "I don't want to lose my status." Tovia Smith, NPR News.
In Northern Europe, where coronavirus cases are surging and the number of deaths hovers at over 133,400, the Italian government is trying to tighten restrictions on those not yet vaccinated to avoid strict lockdowns during the Christmas holidays. NPR's Sylvia Bajoli reports.
Starting December 6th, the unvaccinated will not be allowed to enter cinemas, restaurants, and sports events. And as of December 15th, mandatory vaccination has been extended from healthcare workers to all school staff, police, and military. Italy's vaccination rate is close to 90%, and Prime Minister Mario Draghi said, "We want to safeguard what Italians have achieved in the last year."
NPR's Sylvia Bajoli reporting. The French Interior is calling on Britain, Belgium, and Germany to do more to help France address illegal migration and human trafficking issues. NPR's Eleanor Beardsley reports at least 27 migrants drowned in the English Channel on Wednesday when their small boat made of rubber deflated.
The migrants, who were mostly from Iraq, were trying to get to Britain, where they believe they have a better chance of getting jobs. Fisherman Charles Devos found some of their bodies. He spoke on French television. There were 6, he says. One woman was pregnant, and there was a young guy around 17. It's heartbreaking. For the last 15 years, migrants have been coming to the north of France to attempt the crossing. French and British officials blame each other and smugglers, but war and misery in Africa and the Middle East is propelling the flow. British and French officials say 32,000 people have attempted to cross this year. Wednesday's tragedy was the biggest loss of life so far. Eleanor Beardsley, NPR News, Paris. This is NPR.
Tradition says that Thanksgiving as we know it brought a celebration 400 years ago. English settlers in Massachusetts suffered a brutal winter. About half of them died. The rest celebrated their first harvest in 1621 after accepting help from native people who lived nearby. They included the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. Today, a Wampanoag elder celebrates his 92nd Thanksgiving, and NPR's Netta Ulaby joins him.
You cannot not eat when you visit Earl Mills Sr., a.k.a. Chief Flying Eagle, at his modest blue frame home in Mashpee, Massachusetts.
Come in. Well, I got chowder for you.
Oyster chowder, butternut squash, and a kind of hard-shelled clam.
Quam.
Caught in Cape Cod Bay and breaded and sautéed by the chief himself in his tiny white kitchen.
Cut them with your fork in half so you don't lose the crumb.
Earl Mills Sr. was born in Mashpee in 1929. His father worked as a guide to tourists, taking the likes of President Grover Cleveland on hunting and fishing expeditions. For decades, Mills ran a popular restaurant serving traditional New England food.
I love to cook.
Growing up in the 1930s and 40s, Mills enjoyed Thanksgiving meals maybe not unlike what the Wampanoags shared with the Pilgrims.
Raccoon, rabbit pie. We might even have skunk.
Skunk?
Skunk tastes really like roast pork.
I haven't had skunk.
That's Earl Mills' daughter, Shelley Pognut. She's 67 years old with arresting gray eyes. Thanksgiving with her Wampanoag family, she says, was pretty much like anyone else's.
Good family, good conversation, good food, really good food, a lot of laughing.
But with loving attention, she says, paid to her family's ancestors.
And you make them a plate, and you put it outside after you've done your tobacco.
The tobacco, says Chief Flying Eagle, is a ritual performed in the fire pits many Wampanoags maintain in their backyards.
You present the tobacco to the fire and the smoke bear the message to the spirit world, okay?
That message, he says, can be just a greeting to those who came before.
Very safe, just checking in. Hope everything's going well. It's going well here. The family's good. You certainly helped us to get to this place, and here we are.
Even at a moment of reckoning over America's history of violence towards Black, Brown, and Native people, Chief Flying Eagle is very pro-Thanksgiving.
That's a celebration. We have an ongoing Thanksgiving because we give thanks for everything every day. We celebrate the whole universe. Our thanks.
Still, his tribe is one of only 3 that survived out of more than 60 Wampanoag tribes here when the Pilgrims first arrived. Yellow fever killed 2/3 of the Wampanoag Nation and kept slavery and genocide. At 92 years old, Chief Flying Eagle is only 4 generations away from that very first Thanksgiving.
I think about it all the time.
But, he says, it does not make him sad.
No, nothing about what's gone on is sad for me. I have no control of it. The way I look at it is, we're still here. We're still here.
So, Chief Flying Eagle, Earl Mills Sr., is making his favorite mince pie today. Smoked herring, local cranberries, and roast turkey with cream sauce, with some of his 5 children, 12 grandchildren, and he does not even remember how many great-grandkids, cooking and singing in his Cape Cod kitchen.
In between time, we had fun.
Earl Mills Sr. says, if you can hear this, you're invited to his 93rd Thanksgiving next year. Nado Ulubi, NPR News.
Michelle Butler of Utah, Alabama, doesn't have to think too hard to know what she's grateful for this Thanksgiving. Many of her family members are getting to meet her son Curtis for the first time.
It's going to be real special because this is going to be Curtis' first year home with us for Thanksgiving.
Curtis and his twin sister were born 4 months premature in July.
Curtis was 15 ounces at birth, and his sister Sienna was 14 ounces.
Support for NPR and the following message come from YouTube, presenting their new podcast, The Upload, The Rise of the Creator Economy. In every episode, host Brittany Luce speaks with exceptional creators who have turned their passions into full-time careers. Tap Listen Now to hear the story behind the channel's Sea
Some who serve in the United States military may be struggling to pay for the food on the table. That may include somebody listening now. We've got a lot of people in the military who listen. Advocacy groups looked into this and estimated that about 160,000 military service members have trouble feeding their families. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin spoke about this a week ago.
Well, men and women in uniform and their families have enough to worry about. Basic necessities like food and housing shouldn't be among them.
NPR Pentagon correspondent Tom Bowman is on this story. Tom, good morning.
Good morning, Steve.
And happy Thanksgiving to you. How much of the military is 160,000 people and their families?
Well, it accounts for about 14% of the U.S. military, Steve, and roughly 1/3 of junior enlisted ranks, so the privates and corporals. And it seems to be getting a bit worse. COVID's a big reason. Many troops live off base, and as you know, rents have started going up during the pandemic. And also, during the pandemic, there were a lot of job losses, so a spouse losing or having trouble finding work meant you had one income family trying to make ends meet.
Yeah, one income that could be $21,000 if you're a private. Even if you're a sergeant with years of experience, it might be $40,000, which is enough in some parts of the country, not nearly enough in other parts of the country. So what does the military plan to do about this?
Well, Secretary Austin has said he will temporarily increase the housing allowance troops get in more than 50 high-cost areas around the country to help troops make ends meet. We talked about that housing issue with Colonel Scott Pence. He's the garrison commander at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Let's listen.
It's toughest in those parts of the country that are high income. Navy Station in San Diego, our Joint Base Lewis McChord right outside of Seattle. They deal with different problems that we at Fort Bragg right outside of Fayetteville, North Carolina, don't deal with at such a high level. But we're also seeing rent levels go through the roof off post during this summer, which is forcing people into some short-term food insecurity situations.
And Secretary Austin also said in places with housing shortages, the Pentagon will extend temporary lodging expense reimbursement so families who are moving from one base to another will have a little more time to find a home. He wants also to make sure local commanders are keeping an eye on service members. Do they need the food bank or just basic help with family finances? Remember, these are mostly very young service members in their first job. And then he's also looking in the long term. He wants Pentagon officials to develop what he calls a roadmap to strengthen food security, and he wants answers in 90 days.
Is it hard for service families to keep those two jobs that a lot of families need to pay all the bills?
You know, it is because, of course, military families move every 3 years, so for so short a period, it's hard for a spouse, let's say, to get a job and then keep a decent job. So Secretary Austin is talking about extending a service member's time at a base to provide a little more stability.
What does Congress intend to do about this, if anything?
Well, the service members who are struggling financially will likely see some help from Congress this year. There are amendments in the defense bills of both houses that will provide assistance to troops, creating a basic needs allowance for those families who are struggling the most, Steve.
Tom, thanks for the update. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
That's NPR Pentagon correspondent Tom Bowman.
Podcast supporters include Picasso, providing the modern way to buy, own, and enjoy a second home through real estate co-ownership, not a resort timeshare. Picasso manages the home while you own it. Current listings at pacaso.com.
Every day on Air Talk, Larry Mantle gets answers to your questions about COVID. And now, you can get Larry's daily COVID update on a new podcast, COVID in LA. Listen at LAist.com, on the KPCC app, and wherever you get your podcasts.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. This is a special edition of the LA Report. I'm Ethan Ward, the Unhoused Communities reporter for KPCC and LAist.com. The holidays can be tough for a lot of people. For some, a loved one will be missing at the dinner table, or they may find themselves estranged from family. I wanted to know what
Support for NPR and the following message come from Dataiku, the platform for everyday AI. For organizations looking to make AI part of their day-to-day business and empower everyone to make better decisions with data. Learn more at dataiku.com.
Hi, this is Hope Smith from Fort Wayne, Indiana. I'm about to brave the grocery store the day before Thanksgiving to get the last few ingredients I need. This episode of the NPR Politics Podcast was recorded at
1:04 p.m. on Wednesday, November 24th.
Things may have changed by the time you hear it, but I hope everyone is having a safe, happy, and healthy holiday week. Here's the show.
Good luck at the store. I'll be there later.
I know, me too.
I set my partner out to do it. I feel great.
Good work.
I know. Divide and conquer. Hey there, it's the NPR Politics Podcast. I'm Danielle Kurtzleben, and I cover demographics and culture.
I'm Deirdre Walsh. I cover Congress.
I'm Claudia Gonzalez. I also cover Congress.
And happy almost Thanksgiving to the both of you and to our listeners.
Happy Turkey Day.
Yay. And today we are going to be talking about, you guessed it, everyone's favorite, Congress. Specifically, we're going to talk about two of the biggest stories out of Capitol Hill right now, the infrastructure and Build Back Better agenda, and the January 6th investigation. Now we're going to start with that first one, the Democrats' economic agenda, infrastructure, and Build Back Better. Now, Democrats in Congress are betting that those policies will be a winning message in next year's midterm elections. But the last time Democrats passed a program that reformed the social safety net in this big of a way, aka Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, it sparked a major backlash that carried Republicans to a House majority. Claudia, we've talked about Build Back Better and infrastructure a lot on the podcast, so give us the short version of what's in these bills.
Yeah, so Build Back Better is going to look at a big expansion of social programs. It includes a child tax credit, universal pre-K, $500 billion to combat climate changes, and it also allows Medicare to negotiate lower prescription drug prices for seniors. But there's some provisions that may not make it. It has not passed yet. Provisions such as 4 weeks of paid leave, as well as immigration reform efforts to expand access to work permits. Now, when it comes to the infrastructure bill, that is passed, and that's what we're going to see a lot of movement on in terms of getting enacted. This is traditional infrastructure, roads, bridges, tunnels, broadband. And this is the focus for Democrats when they want to talk about a bipartisan effort that they saw success with.
Now, Deirdre, you've done some great reporting on the politics of this. You've been comparing the way Democrats are selling these policies to the way they sold the ACA back in 2010. What did and didn't work for Democrats back then?
Well, Democrats in Congress are really saying they've learned a lot of lessons about what happened in 2010. I mean, as Claudia outlined, this is a massive expansion of the federal government in a bunch of different areas, and Democrats are trying to get ahead of the message. We did hear a lot of infighting between different factions of the Democratic Party. That happened in 2010 when they were trying to pass Obamacare and trying to get a final deal. We saw that again. And so Democrats are saying we got to move beyond the infighting and talk about the sort of concrete ways that each piece of this agenda affects people's lives in a real way. But, the other thing Democrats are saying is that they need to do a better job of defining the policies, about explaining what it means to expand child care, elder care. These are things that government is doing, but they say that the last time they expanded government, people didn't understand the benefits, and it took years for people to understand that it was going to be easier to get affordable health care if you had pre-existing conditions with the bill that they passed. These were all things that were popular at the time, just like, individual pieces of the Build Back Better Act hold well now. But they say that the difference now is that they understand how important it is to get ahead of the Republican message and define the bill before Republicans define it for them.
And does it seem like they're doing that? Like they're getting ahead of it and actually defining it well so far?
I think they would admit that they have not gotten there yet. I mean, we have seen months of Democratic infighting. So I think that they say that they want to quickly pivot away from that. And you do see members now talking about, I got a prescription drug benefit added to this bill. Like, I was part of the group that brokered an infrastructure bill that means the bridge in my district is going to be widened so that traffic will get better. And that's a real life impact for a lot of Americans.
Well, speaking of economic impacts, we have a new NPR Marist poll out today, and it shows that Americans are, to say the least, uneasy about how the economy is doing, and that inflation is by far the top economic concern. So that means that this agenda, as with the ACA in 2010, is coming amid just a lot of economic worry for Americans. So I'm curious, is it an even more uphill battle now than then? Deirdre, let's start with you again on this.
I do think it is. I mean, we see inflation rates that are the highest they've been in 30 years. We also see, some good economic indicators. Even this morning, we see that fewer people are filing for unemployment. But there's also indications that Americans aren't connecting the policies that Congress is passing with changes in their own lives. What they see at the gas station or at the grocery store, or even when they start Christmas shopping for gifts, is higher prices for a lot of things. And there is a debate about whether another, close to $2 trillion federal spending bill is going to increase inflation or decrease inflation. And a lot of these programs are not going to be in full effect until after people go to the polls in next year's midterm elections.
Claudia, I'm curious what you're hearing on the Hill yourself. Are you hearing a lot of confidence, a lot of worry on the part of Democrats?
Quietly, some worries in terms of how do we get this message across. I think that's so fascinating what Deirdre was looking at in terms of the parallels with the ACA. And it does seem like Republicans have gotten a jump on Democrats in terms of defining this massive legislation. The bipartisan bill, of course, had support from Republicans, and there was even a little bit of controversy there when it came to some who supported it. But they're very united when it comes to this larger spending bill. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is using it as a weapon to fight over lifting the debt limit in the coming weeks, and other Republicans are doing the same. And so it's really interesting seeing these worries about the economy, and Democrats are having to race against them, even as they get good news, as Deirdre mentioned, about weekly jobless claims, which dropped to their lowest level since 1969. according to reports today. So it's quite a gap they're going to have to close in terms of that messaging. It's going to be an uphill battle for them to close it.
But speaking of messaging, I kind of want to get into that because it seems like there's some nuance here, right? Where we're talking about a couple of policies right now, the infrastructure package, and then also all of this social spending, or what the Biden administration calls human infrastructure. And it seems like perhaps voters might need less selling and less explanation on better broadband and better tunnels and roads and bridges than they might need on here is how paid leave might work, or something to that effect. Am I right on that? How is that playing out?
I mean, Democrats are saying that too, Danielle. I talked to Chris Carney. He was a two-term Pennsylvania Democrat who lost his race in 2010 after voting for the Affordable Care Act. I mean, he said a big challenge for him was it was too hard to explain the components of the bill. They weren't going into effect for a while, and Republicans got out in front of the issue, and the bill was really unpopular. He says pieces of this agenda are already popular, and he says it's really easy for people to explain that potholes in their neighborhood are getting fixed. But he did also talk about what he called softer social programs, things like universal pre-K, elder care, child care, which he said the party needs to do a better job of explaining the benefits.
That reminds me, we had some reporting recently from our colleague Barbara Sprunt, and she talked to some of these constituents in one of these moderate Democratic districts in Virginia. This is for Abigail Spanberger, and it was really interesting hearing voices of even Republican-leaning voters who, although they might tout some of the same issues that are trying to be addressed in this larger social spending bill, they're not seeing Democrats as kind of the victors here in getting it done. The linkage is missing there when you get on the ground. Rather, they're getting consumed as well with culture war issues, education concerns, and so it's quite a challenge there.
And Democrats are really saying that's why they need to finish the negotiations on the final piece of this, getting it through the Senate, having the House pass a final version, and get it to the president by the end of the year, because they say they need a full year to talk about the benefits and campaign on it. And if the fighting over the final version bleeds into next year, that will really harm their messaging efforts.
All right, well, we're going to leave it there. We're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk more about Congress, specifically January 6th.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Duckhorn Vineyards. Winemaker Renee Airy shares the values that Duckhorn strives to embody.
We handpick everything at Duckhorn Vineyards, and then once we get the fruit into tank, we're testing the wine, tasting the wine. I mean, ultimately, we want Duckhorn to be known for a tradition of quality, consistency, and elegance.
To learn more and to purchase Duckhorn Vineyards wines, go to duckhorn.com/NPO. This message comes from NPR sponsor Verbo. It's time to plan your next family get-together. And with Verbo, you can book a place with plenty of space that's only a drive away. Find a vacation home nearby with the right amenities for your family so you can have fun and spend time together while making memories that last. Download the Verbo app. That's VRBO.
The news moves fast. Listen to the NPR News Now podcast to keep up. We update stories as they evolve every hour. So no matter when you listen, you get the news as close to live as possible on your schedule. Subscribe to or follow the NPR News Now podcast.
And we're back, and as promised, we're talking more about Congress. We are talking about the January 6th Select Committee, which issued new subpoenas this week, bringing the total number to more than 40. Claudia, I know you've been covering this. What's the latest?
This week we got another wave of subpoenas. 10 were issued, so a total of 45 subpoenas now. This has been focused on Trump allies, former advisors, and those who took part in the planning for the January 6th rally. This week we saw Roger Stone, Alex Jones, two very controversial figures on that list of subpoenas, along with several organizations actually, two of them familiar names now. These are far-right extremist groups, Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. And the focus this week seems to be on whether these individuals played a role, even financially, in putting together efforts to be at the Capitol that day, and also help others who participated that day find assistance to stay at a hotel, what have you. And so that seems to be a lot of the focus now.
And I'm just curious, you said they're up to 45 subpoenas. Is that a lot? Do we have a basis for comparison with other investigations, or is this just so novel that it's hard to gauge that?
There are other select committees in the past that have issued dozens of subpoenas. I was trying to compare to other cases. For example, in 2016, Democrats were complaining about Republicans because they had issued 70 subpoenas in a 3-month period or so when they were looking into Hillary Clinton and the Benghazi attack, among other issues. So it could be on par with what we've seen in previous probes. And that said, the committee members have said they don't want to put a cap on how many subpoenas they're going to issue. I've asked them, well, how many do you think you'll reach when you're done with this? And they're saying, I don't want to put a number on it. They're really moving quickly in terms of issuing these, it seems, every other week at least.
The number that's interesting to me is how many people have talked to the committee that we haven't heard about. I mean, they may have been people who got subpoenas and are cooperating on their own. But it sounds like, even though not all of these people are coming forward, they're still getting a lot of information from a lot of people.
Yeah, that is true. There's about 200 unnamed witnesses who have met with the panel and shared details. And it's interesting, on some of these subpoenas, they will not comment on whether an individual has come in. They'll just say there's no comment. So that could be a clue that that was a conversation that was had, and the committee's not confirming that cooperation as of yet. It seems like we're getting most of the information about those witnesses that are not cooperating, so that's very true.
Speaking of cooperation, it seems very complicated here, or at the very least very complex, where you have all this information coming from all of these sources, but some of these subpoena targets are not cooperating, as you've implied here. Do we have a good sense of who or how many of these, especially high-profile targets, will cooperate?
That's going to be hard to say ultimately if they do cooperate. They have been in talks with many of these folks. That includes the first wave. Steve Bannon was one of those that we know did not, and now he's fighting an indictment for criminal contempt of Congress. And meanwhile, others who were subpoenaed at the same time, such as Mark Meadows, this is a former chief of staff for former President Trump, he is in the midst of possibly facing this question himself if he could be referred for criminal contempt. The difference between Bannon and Meadows, however, is Meadows and his lawyer have engaged the committee. So it's a tougher test when it comes to a criminal contempt referral for him. So time will tell whether these folks will ultimately get in front of this panel and answer at least some of their questions.
Right, and Mark Meadows, who Claudia just mentioned, has claimed executive privilege, which we're going to talk about more in a special episode on Friday, by the way. And his claim of executive privilege could maybe hold more water than it does for someone like Steve Bannon, right? Explain this to me. How does this all work?
Yeah, so Bannon just defied his subpoena outright, so he was a bit of a slam dunk case for the committee to refer him for a criminal contempt. And so the difference there with Meadows is he's engaged. He's doing a little bit of a dance, if you will, as some legal analysts told me, that has dragged on this process. For example, Bannon got that referral within a month, and Meadows were now 2 months out, and they're still considering it. Now, the difference, too, the very big difference, is Meadows was part of the administration on January 6th. Bannon was not. He had been gone from the administration for years. And so Meadows could have some claims to executive privilege. He has said that Trump told him not to share conversations, and there's some conversations that are protected with the president in terms of that deal with directly the office of the presidency. But some lawmakers and legal analysts argue are not. For example, if you used a personal cell phone, personal email, and that may be related to campaign activities. So he does have a stronger case, but lawmakers and these legal analysts argue he could still be susceptible to a criminal contempt referral too.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I learned is that no former lawmaker has ever been indicted for criminal contempt of Congress. So if they go down that road, this could be a precedent-setting move for Congress.
Well, let's get down to the timeline on this, which I know we've talked about on this podcast before. The issue for Democrats here is that they might not be able to hold on to their majorities in 2022, and then this investigation shuts down. So, Claudia, can they wrap this up by November of next year?
That is going to be tough. That is their goal. They've said repeatedly that they want to wrap this up by year end. I've also heard some say before the midterms, because that could taint in terms of this political concern, this partisan concern that the committee is dealing with. They feel like they could erase that if they could get this done before the elections. Now, that said, they are in a very complicated legal case now. They are fighting former President Trump in terms of hundreds of documents they're trying to obtain from the National Archives from his administration, and that court case could drag out for several months. And there's some witnesses that could be following this, like Mark Meadows and others, who want to hold off on doing anything until they see that case resolved. And so they're speeding ahead, and it is possible they could wrap this by next year, but it will be tricky.
Well, and looking ahead to November 2022, we have seen a number of Democrats say they're retiring, that they're just not going to run for re-election, which may well be a sign the Democrats are worried about next year. How big is that group, Deirdre? Who's in it?
Well, right now there's 17 House Democrats who have announced that they are not going to run for re-election, or they're going to run for a different political office in 2022. Democrats say that number is pretty much on pace with previous election cycles and sort of downplay it, say it's a personal decision when you run for Congress, it's a personal decision when you decide it's time to move on. But obviously Republicans see it very differently. They argue that as President Biden's poll numbers have gone down, and our latest NPR Marist poll shows the president's approval ratings at the lowest point of his tenure so far, that is a sign that Democrats are concerned. I mean, as we've said before on this podcast, midterm elections are a referendum on the party in power. And so we'll be watching to see if that group grows. After the holidays, a lot of times people are home with their families. They decide to make decisions about their future, so we could see additional retirements. Also, the redistricting process hasn't fully played out yet. We don't know exactly what the maps will look like in a lot of states, and that could have an impact on additional members of both parties deciding not to run for re-election.
All right, well, we're going to take another break, and by the way, we will be in your feeds all week, but we are going to do Can't Let It Go today instead because of the Thanksgiving holiday. So, we'll be right back with them.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Duckhorn Vineyards. Winemaker Renee Airy shares how taste and instinct, not formula, guide her blending process.
My job is to let the vineyard speak and convey the soul of the wine. And a lot of times I mix one wine with another wine. I think it's going to do something and it does something else. So you really have to kind of rely on your taste buds to kind of get you there.
To learn more and to purchase Duckhorn Vineyards wines, go to duckhorn.com/NPR. This message comes from NPR sponsor Vrbo. It's time to plan your next family get-together. And with Vrbo, you can book a place with plenty of space that's only a drive away. Find a vacation home nearby with the right amenities for your family so you can have fun and spend time together while making memories that last. Download the Vrbo app. That's VRBO.
And we're back, and it is time for Can't Let It Go, the part of the show where we talk about the things we can't stop thinking about, politics or otherwise. We're going to start today with Deirdre. Deirdre, go ahead. What can't you let go of?
The thing I can't let go of this week is NASA announcing essentially a real-life Armageddon mission. You guys remember that movie with Bruce Willis?
Yes.
So he's like the captain or the astronaut of this mission to make sure an asteroid doesn't blow up planet Earth. Well, NASA actually launched a rocket. It's called DART, Double Asteroid Redirection Test. And its mission is basically the same thing, to do research on whether or not, like, this rocket hitting this asteroid will derail the asteroid's trajectory, which kind of makes me worried that, like, Armageddon was, like, a real thing. Like, I thought it was just a cool movie, and now I'm thinking, like, NASA took it seriously enough to actually do a mission. It was launched in California, and they're watching its progress, and the NASA administrator actually invited Bruce Willis to the launch.
Oh my god.
So it shows it's like a real life Armageddon. I guess Bruce Willis didn't show up, but anyway, I'm starting to be worried that like maybe we could be facing some space debris.
Wait, look, Deirdre, I feel like we're burying the lead here. Is there an asteroid hurtling towards Earth right now, or is this a theoretical asteroid that we are just sort of trying to fend off?
So NASA says this is a test. So it's a test to see if the technology can change the trajectory of an asteroid in space. So they did launch this rocket from California towards this asteroid to see if it could just sort of like move it or change its trajectory and not pose a threat. So it doesn't sound like they're worried about anything imminently, but I guess they want to know that if they do this in the future, if there's a threat, that it'll work.
I don't know if I'm that reassured, but
I know.
All right, sounds good.
This is very worrisome.
It's not just a plot of a movie anymore.
Great, great. We need an Aerosmith theme song for this right now.
Yes.
That's all.
I think it was a real high school dance staple. All right, I will go next with much very non-apocalyptic news. I want to talk today about Chuck Grassley and his golden Twitter feed. It is always good. God bless Iowa. And Chuck Grassley put up a real gem of a tweet yesterday. It reads as follows. Thanksgiving time, Grassley clan gathers. Get out old reliable Beth. Called Beth because of a reliable Atlantic family farmer / former staffer for me and Iowans. I vacuum BC. I vacuum because I don't want to be peeling potatoes. Yeah. Sorry, I was trying to be literal here.
But that's the way he writes his tweets.
Yes.
And first of all, I mean, one of the joys here is that his vacuum is named Beth, named after a staffer. I need some enterprise.
Who is Beth? The real Beth.
A human Beth. And see how she feels about this. But also,
I don't think I'd appreciate that if I was the staffer.
I don't know either. But also, the photo is of a vacuum that is giving some real early 80s, 1970s vibes. Like it's like brown
but he could be like the spokesperson for that brand, whatever it is, like, because if it's still kicking.
I think it was a Hoover. Yeah.
You know, I did see, I can't vouch for the fact checking here, but I did see some folks on Twitter doing some sleuthing, and they found that this particular model was made in 1983.
Wow.
Which means this vacuum is older than
That's amazing.
Our audience. So
I also like the idea of, Chuck Grassley in his late 80s, like, vacuuming the house for his Thanksgiving guests. It just shows he's just like us, right? He has to clean.
I know.
Also, relatable, vacuuming rather than peeling potatoes. I'm with him. Peeling potatoes is the worst. Good for you, Chuck.
Although I have this image of Grassley, he's just vacuuming like a small square, and he just sits there with Beth, and that's all he's doing. He's like, I can't help you with that turkey. I'm doing the square here.
All right, Claudia, now it's you. Why can't you let go?
I cannot let go of the House of Gucci, which is dropping today. You may have heard about it. Lady Gaga, Adam Driver, Jared Leto, a bunch of people I like to follow. Very fortunate because our very own Lexi Shapittle pointed me to another part of this story, which are the reviews. So I'm not sure if I'm more obsessed with seeing the movie or reading more reviews, because apparently it's so bad it's good. So
oh no, I kind of want to see it, but
now I'm really, really intrigued. I thought before, I gotta see whatever Lady Gaga does, I'm there for her. But this takes it to another level, and the reviews are hilarious. For example, Vox was one review, and the writer in that case said it's not good, but boy oh boy is it great. And the writer goes on to say they've tried for days now to decide exactly when their soul left their body and ascended to paradise during watching of this film. So, yes.
The costumes have got to be good, though.
Yes, the passion, the costumes, the accents, maybe not so good.
I don't consider myself a particularly ethical person, but I am fair.
The New York Times, for example, said the nicest thing they could say about the film was it should have been in Italian. But that all said, I want to keep reading the reviews. I want to see the movie. I can't wait. Love it. Everything.
You know, I had no intention of watching this, but the thought of my soul leaving my body because of this show, I mean, I think you just sold me, Claudia. Thank you. All right, that's a wrap for today, but a reminder that we've got some excellent episodes for you tomorrow and Friday. So, if the conversation at your Thanksgiving turns to politics, you know where to turn. In the meantime, our executive producer is Mathoni Maturi, our editor is Eric McDaniel, our producers are Martin Girdwood and Elena Moore. Thank you to Lexi Shapittle and Brandon Carter. I am Danielle Kurtzleben. I cover demographics and culture.
I'm Deirdre Walsh. I cover Congress.
And I'm Claudia Grisales. I also cover Congress.
And thank you for listening to the NPR Politics Podcast.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Mini Cooper. Santa needs 9 overfed deer for a fast, fun ride. Might be time for Santa to stop by the Mini Season of Drive year-end event at your local Mini dealer and upgrade his ride. Go to miniusa.com for details.
John Perry joins us next. He's a senior pastor of Mount Sinai Missionary Baptist Church in Brunswick, Georgia, and he joined the Arbery family during the trial. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you. Good morning to you and happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you, sir. Debbie Elliott's report included a description there of a T-shirt that said "Justice Served." Was it?
Yes, it was. It was breathtaking.
Support for NPR and the following message come from YouTube. Ever wondered how creators like Lily Singh or Emmy Babe turned their passions into businesses? Or how instructional and fitness creators like the Fitness Marshal were able to monetize their YouTube channel? Tap Listen Now to hear the trailer of The Upload, The Rise of the Creator Economy, a new 5-part podcast hosted by Brittany Luce that takes listeners behind the scenes with YouTube creators who have built their businesses on and off the platform.
The origin story of America's Thanksgiving holiday imagines the Pilgrims surviving harsh winters because of friendly Native Americans who taught them how to farm. Since then, indigenous peoples have had to adapt to the food system Europeans developed here. They often lack access to healthy foods, but there's a movement to preserve traditional farming practices. From Member Station KNAU in Flagstaff, Arizona, Melissa Simmons.
At Coffee Pot Farms on the Navajo Nation, Sherilyn Yazzie starts the day with prayer.
Just pray and ask for a good day, for more rain if possible, but just for things to be healthy.
Ceremony and seed collecting are part of the seasonal rhythms of the off-grid farm. But Yazzie also uses non-traditional techniques, like hoop houses and a walk-behind tractor. She grows enough produce to feed 30 or 40 families.
It feels good. And then the other thing is when you see plants grow, it's just something you're like, wow. It's always, it's like magical every time you see a little seed come up. How are you doing with a plant?
Yazzie studied to be a social worker, but she realized she couldn't convince people to eat healthy food if they didn't have access to it. The Navajo and Hopi nations, home to nearly 200,000 people and larger than West Virginia, have just 15 grocery stores.
One of the things that I thought was, okay, well, if our ancestors were given from our holy people seeds, it says, okay, you're going to grow your own food, you're given cattle or sheep, you're supposed to be sustainable that way. How come we're not doing it?
Hopi chef Samana Jutsi says many traditional ways of growing and cooking food have been lost.
Not everybody has that privilege of being able to be that connected with their culture.
Today she's teaching a class of Hopi and Navajo students in Flagstaff. She demonstrates how to turn a corn husk into a spoon.
The other thing I'm using these for is making a brush.
Jutsi emphasizes cultures change and adapt to different technologies. The students roast sweet potatoes in a cob oven and boil corn tea in an aluminum pot.
To showcase what new technology can do with traditional knowledge is really amazing. So I wanted the kids to be able to appreciate that and be able to understand, you know, like it's not a stagnant culture.
The kids make their own tea blends out of local plants like sage and juniper berries, plus a few things borrowed from other cultures like oolong and pineapple. This is Lexi Jacob, Lauren Tohe, and Trinity Begay.
I put in the sage and that cranberry. I just decided on like sage